Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really diving headfirst into something critical. How are companies actually rewiring themselves? Not just, playing with generative AI, but getting real tangible value out of it. We're talking about moving past the sandbox, past the experiments, and into, well, real bottom line impact. And our guide for this is some really fresh data. It's from a McKinsey Global Survey on AI, basically hot off the presses from March 2025. It's packed with stuff that I think is going to, well, really shift how you think about integrating Gen AI. So our mission today, what are the specific structures, the processes, the leadership styles that are actually working? Why are some companies getting that value? And, others still stuck wondering how.
It's a really crucial question because, the initial buzz around Gen AI was huge,
Yeah.
right? Massive excitement. But the real challenge, and honestly where the lasting value is integrating it properly, getting it deep into the operating model of the business. And this report, it gives us this rare data-backed view of what's genuinely effective, particularly for the bigger players. It offers maybe a clearer roadmap than we've had before.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture then. We all feel like AI is just everywhere now. And the data backs that up. AI use is really building momentum. This survey found this huge surge, 78% of organizations. They now say they use AI in at least one business function.
Wow.
Just think about that jump. It was only 55% a year before. And what's really interesting is how the larger companies, over $500 million revenue, they seem to be driving these organizational changes faster.
And it's not just if they're using it, it's the depth, right? They're using AI in more functions now, on average, about 3 functions.
Cool.
And a majority are using it in more than one place. Then you look at Gen AI specifically, and the acceleration is, well, it's striking. 71% are regularly using it in at least one function.
So, yeah, if you're seeing AI cropping up in meeting after meeting, department after department, you're definitely not imagining it. This whole digital rewiring thing, it's happening fast, faster than maybe we thought. Okay, with that kind of speed, it really begs the question, who's actually steering the ship here?
Yeah.
Let's get into leadership, governance. What's the survey tell us about who's in charge of AI governance?
Yeah, this is a really key finding. And it really speaks to that rewiring idea. The data, it shows this strong link, this correlation. When the CEO is overseeing AI governance, particularly in those bigger companies, they report significantly higher bottom line impact from Gen AI. Yeah. The survey found about 28% of organizations using AI say their CEO is at the helm for governance. Another 17% say it's the board. But often it's kind of shared, usually involves about 2 leaders on average.
Okay, so why does that top-down leadership matter so much?
Well, because getting real value from Gen AI, it isn't just about installing some new software. It's about transformation, a complete transformation of how work actually gets done.
Right.
And that kind of deep change, it needs executive level decisions, on scarce resources, on talent, on managing big changes across the board. It's just not something you can delegate purely to IT and then expect the whole company to change fundamentally. You really need that champion, someone who can force that cross-functional work and allocate resources properly instead of, letting it get stuck in silos.
Okay, let's unpack this. So it's not just about getting the tech, it's about the leadership commitment to fundamentally change operations. Transformation, not just tech, like you said.
Exactly. Without that deep commitment, you're kind of building on sand. So if you're involved in AI projects looking for that executive buy-in, it's not just a nice to have. The data suggests it's a strong predictor of success.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've talked about the who. Let's shift to the how. What specific changes are making the biggest difference? How are companies actually, re-engineering their workflows?
The survey is incredibly clear on this one. They tested, I think, 25 different attributes.
Yeah.
And redesigning workflows had the single biggest effect, the biggest impact on an organization's ability to see EBIT impact. Earnings before interest and taxes.
Wow, the single biggest.
Yep. But the reality check is only about 21% of organizations using Gen AI have actually fundamentally redesigned even some workflows.
Yeah.
So it shows it's still pretty early days for this really crucial step, but it is absolutely the proven path to getting significant impact. This isn't just tweaking things, it's a fundamental overhaul. The data just screams that the company's getting real returns. They're tearing down the old blueprints, not just slapping Gen AI on top. It's like process first, then tech.
So for you listening, if you want that real measurable value from Gen AI, don't just layer it on to the old ways of doing things. You have to think, really think, about how it can fundamentally reshape how you work. Because if you're just bolting it onto maybe inefficient processes you already have, you might be missing the whole point of this rewiring we're talking about. Okay, keeping that in mind. How are companies structuring these AI efforts? Is it like one central team doing everything, or is it more spread out? This rewiring must involve some structural decisions too, right?
Yeah, and they're being selective about it. It's not all one way.
Yeah.
For things like risk and compliance, and also data governance specifically for AI, a fully centralized model is most common there, like a center of excellence. Over half centralize risk and compliance, almost half do it for data governance.
Okay.
But contrast that with managing, say, tech talent or the actual adoption of AI solutions. There, it's more common to see a hybrid model, or maybe partially centralized. Around half reported that for each.
Hmm.
Although, interestingly, smaller companies, they're more likely to fully centralize those bigs, too. Maybe it's just a resource thing for them.
So yeah, definitely not one size fits all. Different parts of AI deployment seem to need different structures. It really reflects how complex this whole rewiring process is.
Okay, as AI use grows, we all know the risks grow too. So what are companies actually doing about mitigation? Are they keeping pace? Well, many are definitely trying to ramp up their risk mitigation. The survey highlights the top risks people are actively managing: inaccuracy, cybersecurity, and intellectual property infringement. And maybe not surprisingly, those are also the ones most often causing actual negative consequences.
Makes sense.
But when it comes to actually reviewing the outputs from Gen AI, practices are all over the map. About a quarter review all the content before it gets used, but then a similar number, about a quarter, review 20% or less.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is. And you see industry differences. Companies in business, legal, professional services, much more likely to review everything, which, makes sense given the stakes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, something you pointed out. Larger organizations, they're mitigating more risks overall, like cybersecurity and privacy,
Right.
but maybe not necessarily accuracy or explainability as much. That feels a bit counterintuitive. Why do you think those specific risks might be less prioritized by the big players, even with more resources?
Yeah, it's a great question. The survey doesn't give a direct why, unfortunately,
Hmm.
but it does tell us, risk awareness is growing, but the practices for managing them still pretty inconsistent. Perhaps maybe larger orgs are focusing on the more, let's say, traditional IT risks they understand well, like cyber. While the nuances of AI accuracy and explainability, maybe those are still evolving, still harder to pin down. So for you, the takeaway is be really mindful of output review, especially depending on your industry and just how sensitive the content is.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. What about the proven practices for actually getting value? Is there a kind of roadmap? And how well are companies actually following these best practices? It feels like maybe there's a map, but people aren't using it.
Yeah, that's kind of the story. The survey did identify 12 specific adoption and scaling practices that correlate positively with value. But here's the sobering part. Most companies are not implementing them yet. Less than a third of respondents said they follow most of these practices.
Less than a third. Wow.
Yeah. And the single most impactful practice they found, it's pretty basic actually, just tracking well-defined KPIs for your Gen AI solutions.
Just tracking metrics.
Seems simple,
Yeah.
but apparently crucial. And for the larger organizations, having a clearly defined roadmap also has a big impact. And generally, these larger orgs, they're more disciplined. They're more likely to follow practices like having dedicated teams like a PMO, doing regular internal communications, getting senior leaders involved, role modeling, doing role-based training, fostering trust, all that stuff. And the report really hammers this point about thinking big. The organization's building real, lasting competitive advantage. They're not just dabbling. They're going for wholesale transformative change, end-to-end solutions. They have this overarching enterprise-level transformative vision.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of fundamental enterprise-wide rewiring, it affects everything. How you capture data, build models, secururity, reusability, building that foundational infrastructure. It essentially creates this platform, this advantage that lets them deploy more functionality faster and cheaper later on.
So it's really not just about isolated projects then. It's about being ambitious right from the start, having that clear company-wide vision for how Gen AI fits in.
Precisely. If you're not tracking KPIs or you don't have a clear roadmap for your AI stuff, you might be leaving a lot of value on the table. And honestly, probably falling behind the ones who are really committed to that deep enterprise-level rewiring.
Okay, now for the question everyone asks. The water cooler question. What about jobs? Is AI the job killer everyone fears? Or is it creating jobs? What's the real workforce impact of all this tech rewiring?
Yeah, the survey tackles that job killer fear directly. And like most things, it's more nuanced than the headlines. A plurality, about 38%, actually predict little effect on their overall workforce size in the next 3 years because of Gen AI.
Little effect.
Yeah,
Interesting.
a little overall effect. But there are definitely shifts happening underneath. Organizations are hiring for AI roles, including some new risk-related ones like AI compliance specialists, 13% reported hiring those, AI ethics specialists, 6%. And the larger companies, well, they're hiring a broader range of AI roles, as you'd expect.
And is it still hard to hire these people?
It's still challenging, yeah. But the difficulty seems to be easing a bit compared to past years for most roles. The big exception, AI data scientists. They remain in incredibly high demand. Half the organizations expect they'll need more of them.
Okay, so hiring is happening. What about the existing workforce? Reskilling.
Definitely happening. Many organizations have started reskilling. About 44% said they reskilled up to 5% of their workforce in the past year alone, and they expect to do more in the next 3 years. For instance, 20% expect to reskill somewhere between 11% and 20% of their workforce.
And when people save time using Gen AI, what are they doing with that time?
Mostly, it seems they redirect it, either to entirely new activities or they spend more time on their existing tasks that aren't automated. Although here's another difference. Larger organizations, they are more likely to actually reduce headcount because of those time savings.
Ah, okay. Any specific areas seeing cuts?
Yeah, the functions expected to see headcount decrease the most were service operations and supply chain and inventory management.
And increases.
Increases are more likely in IT and product development, where they're building the new solutions.
And this is fascinating too. C-level execs, 53% of them are leading in their personal use of Gen AI. That's higher than mid-level managers at 44%. Does that mean they're actually role modeling or maybe just exploring it themselves before they push it out?
Could be a bit of both, right? But it really underlines that the workforce impact isn't simple reduction. It's complex. It's strategic reallocation of people's effort, often towards totally new things, higher value tasks, which means reskilling is absolutely critical. So for you, the message is, yeah, automation handles some tasks, but your unique human skills, they become even more important for the new problems and opportunities AI throws up.
Right. So after all these changes, leadership, workflows, the workforce, are companies actually seeing the money? Tangible financial benefits? Are we talking real revenue growth, real cost savings from Gen AI?
Yes, absolutely. Organizations are increasingly reporting both.
Yeah.
Revenue increases and cost reductions. But importantly, within the specific business units using Gen AI.
Okay, so in pockets.
Exactly, pockets. So for instance, marketing and sales, service operations, software engineering, those functions consistently see revenue bumps. And cost decreases are often reported in areas like supply chain, service operations, again, IT, knowledge management. So the individual gears, they're definitely turning faster, more efficiently.
Okay, but I sense a but coming.
Yes, here's the crucial aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the biggest challenge in this whole rewiring story. Despite all these localized unit-level gains, more than 80% of the respondents, they say their organizations are not yet seeing a tangible impact on enterprise-level EBIT from Gen AI.
80%. Wow, so it's powerful in those pockets, like you said, in individual departments.
Yeah.
But that big company-wide hit to the bottom line, that's still forming. It feels like, yeah, the individual circuit boards are getting rewired, but the whole enterprise network isn't fully optimized yet. What does this all really mean for the bigger picture then?
Okay, we've covered a lot today.
Mm-hmm.
AI adoption, surging, especially in big companies,
Mm-hmm.
top-down leadership, and really digging in to redesign workflows. That seems absolutely crucial for impact.
Definitely.
Companies are stepping up on risk mitigation, but maybe inconsistently.
Yeah, it varies a lot.
And the value, it's clearly there at the business unit level, but making that leap to enterprise-wide impact from Gen AI, that's still a major work in progress for almost everyone. Precisely. Look, these are still, relatively speaking, early days.
Mm-hmm.
But clear patterns are definitely emerging for how to successfully implement Gen AI. And it's evident the organization's really capturing value. They're the ones doing the hard work of rewiring, changing processes, adopting specific disciplined management practices, not just, playing with cool tech. It's a foundational shift, not just some add-on.
Which brings us to maybe a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given that C-level execs are personally using Gen AI more, right? They're ahead of the curve personally.
Right.
Yet their organizations are still struggling to translate those unit-level wins into enterprise-wide impact. How might that gap between leadership's personal experience and the organization's transformation, how might that evolve in the year ahead? And maybe more importantly, what specific steps can you take in your own work in your organization to help bridge that gap, to move from those isolated gains towards that broader strategic rewiring? Lots to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.